start the recording. I would like to call the coordinating committee meeting to order. As permitted by the Governor's Disaster Declaration of August 19th, 2022, the determination has been made that an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent for this committee to meet in person. To ensure a transparent and open meeting as possible, we will post the meeting materials approximately 1 week in advance. We'll provide a recording of this meeting linked to our website, and we'll take all votes by roll call. Staff does have some additional virtual meeting logistical announcements before we take the roll. Stephanie?
Good morning, everyone. Just a couple extra announcements. As the chairman said, this meeting is being recorded. Please use your mute function when not speaking. This will help eliminate excess background noise. And you can, if you are on the phone, you can unmute yourself by hitting *6. Members of the public, if you have questions during the meeting, please use that chat box and staff will be monitoring that and bringing those up to the committee. Additionally, if you wish to address the committee during the public comment portion of the agenda, you can indicate your desire to do so in that chat box and we'll call upon you at that time. Members of the committee, when making a motion, please include your name so staff can record it properly. That concludes my meeting announcements, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We can please have a roll call.
Chairman Reinbold?
Here.
Mayor Broly?
Here.
Stephen Schaefer? Diane Williams?
Present.
Jessica Hector Sue?
Here.
Aaron Dernbaugh?
Present.
And Bob Tucker?
Here.
We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any agenda changes? Okay, thank you. Hearing none, we'll move on to our next item. Under Executive Director's announcements, we're joined this morning by our Executive Director, Aaron Alman, and I would like to give Aaron the floor for some announcements. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Chairman Reinbold. I am happy to be here this morning. I wanted to provide a little bit of context, and I'm going to customize it a little bit because those of you who are attending the board meeting will hear some of this again. But I think relevant to this committee specifically are really that we are in the final stages of drafting an update to the 2050 plan. It includes a number of adjustments based on revenues that the state has for transportation. We've also taken another look at our socioeconomic forecasts for the region, which includes population projections and jobs, and updated that data. I think we have heard from the public on a couple different areas related to the impacts of transportation on greenhouse gases, which I know is something that our plan talks a lot about. One of the things that I think this initial plan update is doing is trying to sort of get our arms around what's changed with the hopes that the 2060 plan development, which will begin in earnest next year, will help us really think through how we address our critical climate challenges, as well as addressing our transportation challenges that have been brought on and highlighted and elevated due to COVID. We also noted a number of things that we just don't have today, like the right types of tools and the right data and analysis to be able to assess some of the projects that we have right now in meaningful ways to really look at sort of the climate impact. So we're in the process of developing some RFPs to help support that work that you'll see coming out here in the next few months that, again, will really help us lead into the 2060 plan development. So the board will see that this morning as a draft. Our transportation committee will see it on Friday as a draft. And then our time frame is to get approval from the board and the MPO policy committee at their joint meeting in October. I wanted to just touch on, I think the three areas of focus here are regional economy, our climate, and transportation here, and just highlight a couple ongoing activities that we have. For regional economy on our board agenda this morning, there is a 3-year agreement with Cook County to help them do research and analysis related to their property taxes and incentives and classifications. So we are excited to support them in this work. It's something that we have often talked about, but really to be a partner with them and develop some analytical resources and understanding of what some of their opportunities are in front of them is something that the team, I know, is really looking forward to embarking on. Under the climate realm, I think there's probably a lot. I was trying to get my arms around what I wanted to mention here, because there's a lot of activity that we have going on. The infrastructure bill does highlight climate as a critical need, the federal infrastructure bill, which is a great opportunity. But we have a new resource that's coming online for communities. We've completed our regional greenhouse gas inventory. Previously, we've done that as a very large regional number, and it's been a little bit challenging to break it out to make it meaningful for communities. This time around, coming out here in the next week or two, we will have community snapshots on greenhouse gases, which is exciting. I think it will help our partners, our local municipalities understand where they stand in related to their greenhouse gases across the region. And then our hope would then be to help them utilize this as a way to think about development and transportation infrastructure in different, more meaningful ways, and to move the needle on greenhouse gas reductions across our region. We also will be putting out an RFP for support to develop a regional transportation vulnerability assessment. Again, some of these, that project specifically will help our region be more competitive and qualify for transportation funds from the new federal bill that allow our transportation system to be more resilient and match the federal dollars with less local dollars. So there's a lot of opportunity in that program that will be coming. And then I will also be talking a little bit at the board meeting this morning. We have been working really hard. Stephanie has actually been working really hard and her team to get the 7 counties and IDOT to work together on a Safe Streets for All grant application. It's a federal grant application that will support planning for Vision Zero and safety across our region. One of the things that we've been talking about this summer is the fatality and serious injury numbers have been finalized for 2021, is that our numbers of fatalities and serious injuries have increased about 40% over 2019.
Wow.
And, you know, as a regional agency, as someone who's responsible for tracking those metrics, it's simply unacceptable. The opportunity in front of us really is that once we help our counties have these Safe Streets for All plans, then they are competitive for over what's slated to be $1 billion annually over the course of the infrastructure bill and hard infrastructure funds. We've got a great application. I knock on wood, we've got all of our counties almost at the table. We've got one more that's having a meeting that's gonna get us down to the deadline. The grant application is due tomorrow. We are asking for nearly the maximum amount of funding available. And we've got IDOT as a strong partner in this and contributing about half of the local match, along with our counties contributing a little bit over half of the local match as well. So that we're excited about on the transportation front. And then I think just lastly here, and I'll wrap it up, is that, you know, we've been talking with our stakeholders from every corner across the region about the infrastructure bill's impact to regional planning activities. There have been increases in planning funds across the board, and we want to make certain that we aren't leaving federal infrastructure dollars for planning on the table, because the work that we do to model what happens when we change things across the region really does impact everyone's transportation infrastructure. So Cmap relies on local contributions from our 284 municipalities and our counties, our transit agencies, the tollway, the city of Chicago. Our local contributions are required to be 20% of the local plan of the federal planning dollars that are available to us. In past years, it's totaled about $880,000, with the increase $880,000 from our local communities and contributions, and about $3.5 million from IDOT is our 8%. So we've been out talking about increases to our partners, to the councils of mayors, to our counties, and everybody who contributes to the region. So we are anticipating that this in the next 2 weeks or so, when our invoices go out, that our dues, our local contributions are going to increase across the board to help us make sure that we are taking advantage of all of the federal dollars that are available for planning across our region. So with that, I think I will leave it there. Again, there's always no loss of things to share with the committee, but I wanted to, given the fact that we've got our chairs from our three our transportation, our climate, and our regional economy committees here, I wanted to highlight a couple relevant work products that we've got going on. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Erin? Okay, thank you, Aaron. Great information. We really appreciate that. We'll move on to our next item, which is the approval of the minutes. A copy of the minutes from May 11th, 2022 were included in our packets. Are there any requested changes, corrections, or deletions to the minutes? Okay, thank you. Hearing none, may I get a motion in a second with a reminder that we do ask when you're making a motion to state your name.
This is Bob
Hector
Tucker,
Sue.
motion to approve.
Thank you, Bob.
Hector Sue, I'll second.
Thank you. Appreciate that. We do have a first and a second. Are there any questions? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mayor Reinbold,
Yes.
Mayor Broley,
Yes.
Stefan Schaefer, who I believe is
Yeah.
about to join us if he has not. Stefan?
Can you hear me?
Yes, and we will mark you as present as well. Welcome to the meeting.
Thank
Diane Williams,
I was absent for that meeting, so I should abstain, I think.
Jessica Hester Sue,
Aye.
Aaron Dernbaugh,
Yes.
and Bob Tucker.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to new business. First item is Transportation Committee's annual report. Excuse me, staff will provide the coordinating committee with an overview of the Transportation Committee's annual report. This item is informational only, and we will start the presentation by Doug Ferguson and Lindsay Bailey. Presenters, you have the floor.
Good morning, committee. Doug Ferguson. I'm a senior analyst with the Transportation Programming Group here at Cmap and co-staff liaison for the Transportation Committee, along with Lindsay Bailey. We're here today to give you an update on the work of the Transportation Committee so far this year. Before I begin, I would like to recognize Jessica Hector Sue, thank her for her first year sitting in as the chair of the Transportation Committee. Next slide, please. Included in your materials today is an annual report for the Transportation Committee, which we will be going through in this presentation. Next slide. The Transportation Committee is created through the Memorandum of Understanding between the Cmap Board and the MPO Policy Committee. The committee serves as a working committee for both, but it is also must consider all recommendations and policy decisions that are brought to prior to bringing them to the MPO Policy Committee. Membership of the committee is by agency and is jointly decided between the board and the MPO Policy Committee. Next slide. The goals of the committee can best be summarized through its vision of promoting a regional transportation system that is safe, efficient, and accessible, while sustaining the region's vision related to the natural environment, economic and community development, social equity, and public health. Next slide. I'm now going to turn over the presentation to Lindsay to discuss the major areas of work of the committee and some of its future. Lindsay.
Doug, to the federal requirements for the MPO, such as the Transportation Improvement Program amendments, the financial overview. In 2022, we've also been covering the On to 2050 update, and traffic safety, as Aaron mentioned, has been a high priority. And we've had a number of presentations such as the RTA strategic plan, mobility recovery, and the National Science Foundation, accessibility and sidewalk inventory. Next slide. So as we look to the future, some focus areas will be the safe systems approach, ADA transition plans, which I believe you'll be hearing a little bit about that later, and transit recovery, implementation of IIJA, climate issues, and the newly proposed greenhouse gas emission performance measures. Next. So that's all we've got, and this is our contact information if you have any further questions. That is all, so we thank you for your time.
Very good. Thank you for the presentation. We appreciate that. Are there any questions for the presenters? Okay, thank you. Hearing none, we'll move on to our next item. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair. Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
yes, please,
Oh, sorry,
go ahead.
Mr. Chair. If I could just, for the committee, so you will be seeing these types of updates from all the committees at your upcoming meetings. This is part of our new approach to having some sort of annual reports that come up from each of the committees. Those annual reports will be presented to this coordinating committee, and then at the next board meeting, the same report will be presented to the full board. So this will be a series that you will see, and so there will be a different topic area at each of the meetings based on the different committees. So I just wanted to highlight that this is part of some of those changes that we're making to try to have a little more transparency and elevate some of those issues to this committee and to the board from the working committees. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, great idea. Thank you. Thank you very much, Stephanie. We appreciate that. Our next item is the ADA transition plan. The staff at this time will provide an overview of Cmap's ADA transition planning work. This item is also informational only, and we will start the presentation with Linda. And Linda, I'm going to have, I'm probably going to mispronounce your name, so I apologize in advance. It's Miss Andra. Am I close?
You are super close. It's Linda Mastandria. And Katie, just to confirm with you, I think we've got the presentation recorded, but I'll stay on to answer any questions that anybody may have.
Thank you, Linda.
Sure. Hello, my name is Linda Mastandria, and I'm the Director of Regional ADA Planning and Local Safety for the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Today, I'd like to share some thoughts with you on the work Cmap is doing to make it better for people with disabilities and all of us across the region. The roadmap we're going to talk about today begins with where we are. We'll talk about what's required under the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA. We'll discuss what all of that means. We'll talk about what we can do to improve accessibility across the region. And then we'll wrap it all up and talk about how we can make it better together. Let's start with a look at where we are today. In order to improve accessibility across the region, we need to know where we're beginning. Where the sidewalk ends, a report from the Metropolitan Planning Council and the Great Lakes ADA Center gives us a great start in doing just that. But the bottom line is this. At the time of this study, of the over 280 some communities in northeastern Illinois, about 10% had a transition plan in place. That means there's lots of room to improve and lots of work for Cmap and all of us to do together to improve accessibility and integration for people with disabilities, their families, friends, and colleagues across the region. For those of you who don't know, the ADA was signed into law in 1990. It provides broad protections for people with disabilities, prohibiting discrimination in employment, state and local government programs and services, public accommodations, and telecommunications. The premise of the law is that integration benefits not only people with disabilities, but society as a whole. It means that including people with disabilities in the fabric of our communities makes us stronger, more resilient, and better off economically. We learn that in providing programs and services for people with disabilities, we all benefit. Curb cuts are used not just by people using wheelchairs, for example, but by parents pushing strollers and people wheeling luggage. Captions on television are routinely shown in sports bars and noisy environments, but they were originally intended for deaf and hard of hearing people. So today, we're going to be focusing on Title II. This covers state and local governments, and this includes things like cities, towns, villages, counties, townships, and even unincorporated areas. And under the ADA, These are all referred to as public entities. So we'll talk about that now. When we talk about public entities, we're really talking about all the programs and services of that entity, right? Things like City Hall, courthouses, police, fire, EMS, park district programs, places where you go to pay fines, register a business, get a tag for your dog. Things like transit stops and stations, parking lots and street parking, sidewalks and curbs. And no matter how many of these programs, services, or facilities a public entity has, all public entities, regardless of their size or number of employees, have to do two things. They have to conduct a self-evaluation, and they have to provide public notice about the ADA and its requirements. And public entities with 50 or more employees have a couple of additional requirements. They also have to designate an ADA coordinator who's an employee that will oversee Title II compliance. And this may be that person's sole responsibility, or it may be an additional title that they have. There's also a requirement that they establish a grievance procedure. This provides a mechanism for people who believe they've been discriminated against based on their disability to file a complaint and have that complaint addressed. There's also a requirement that they conduct a self-evaluation and develop a transition plan. And I'd like to bring up a few points about self-evaluations. These are an assessment of the public entity's programs, services, and physical facilities, along with an identification of any barriers preventing the full participation of people with disabilities. And a transition plan takes the next step in the process. It takes all the information from the self-evaluation and creates a roadmap that not only addresses compliance with the law, but it also addresses integrating and including people with disabilities. This requires that public entity to develop a plan to not only address the barriers, but also to include a timeline for addressing those barriers, to include a budget, and to include the person or people who will be responsible for the implementation of that plan. Now you have a little better understanding of where we've come from, what the requirements of the law are, and a little bit more about self-evaluations and transition plans. Now I'd like to get into what it all means, why it's important, and why we ought to care about this. So let's talk about that now. By US Census and American Community Survey estimates, there's somewhere around 61 million Americans living with a disability today. And contrary to the belief that people with disabilities all exist on government benefits, live in subsidized housing, and have no disposable income, studies of the worldwide purchasing power of people with disabilities tell quite a different story. In fact, they tell us that there's a collective $8 trillion worth of that purchasing power across the globe. And in the United States alone, people with disabilities have more than $490 billion in disposable income. I imagine that communities that are building or rebuilding or looking to grow their economies and expand their tax base might want to tap into that power, right? And the idea here is that by including and integrating people with disabilities into our communities, we're becoming more equitable. We're providing people with disabilities the opportunity to live, to work, to play in these communities. And as a result, they're becoming part of that economic engine that drives long-term improvement and economic growth. So now that we understand some of what it all means, what exactly can we do? Let's talk about that. We've talked about where we've come from, some of the requirements of the law, and we've learned about some very important economic benefits to improving accessibility. Let's now turn to talking about what we can do as Cmap, as individuals, as advocates, as government officials, to move the needle on integrating people with disabilities into our communities. I know it can be a little overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. Let's take a few minutes to talk about some of the ways that Cmap is going to help our communities improve accessibility, integrate people with disabilities, and improve their economies too. We're creating a multifaceted program to meet you where you are. All of us are on our own unique journey when it comes to making our communities accessible. It isn't one size fits all, so the programs we provide shouldn't be either. We're providing education and training for public entities, advocates, and allies to give you a grounding in the requirements of the law, the reasons behind the law, and how to implement the requirements successfully. We'll be engaging in outreach to and with public entities, disability stakeholder organizations, and others to inspire, educate, inform, and bring everyone along on this important mission. We'll provide real-time, on-demand technical assistance to our communities to guide them along in this process. And we'll develop a toolbox of resources, templates, checklists, and other materials to aid in completion of self-evaluations and transition plans. So with that as our backdrop, let's talk now about how we can all make it better together. As the Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO for the region, Cmap needs to make sure that our public entities receiving transportation funds are complying with their obligations under the ADA. And while we're taking the lead on developing training, outreach, technical assistance, tools, and resources to make it easier for all of you, we recognize that no one can do this alone. It is a monumental effort, and it takes more than just one organization or person to make it happen. It takes all of us, public entities and officials, disability stakeholders, the broader community, and Cmap working together. But I'm confident that we can do it, and that together we're going to build an accessible, inclusive region where people with and without disabilities can live, work, and play side by side. If you have any questions or you need additional information, please feel free to reach out. My email is lmastandrea, that's LMASTANDREA @cmap.illinois.gov. Thank you so much for your time and attention today.
Thank you, Linda. Are there any questions for Linda? Okay, thank you again, Linda. Great presentation. We'll move on to our next item. For our next item, staff will provide an overview of the ONTO 2050 plan update components and the public comments received on the draft. This item is also informational, and I will turn this to Stephanie.
Actually, I don't know, Erin, are you able to provide an update on where we're at with the ONTO 2050 plan? I don't have.
Sure. I would be happy to. Let me see. Well, essentially what we have right now for the ONTO 2050 plan is that the public comment period closed the middle of last month. We have posted for the board meeting this morning draft documentation of all of the public engagement, all of the appendix, and the draft plan overall that was made available throughout the public comment period. As I mentioned earlier, a number of the comments that we received were related to the increase in greenhouse gases and that relationship between the transportation infrastructure expansion projects. I will note that in the plan overall, over 90%, probably pretty close to 95% of the projected transportation revenues over the 30-year time frame are focused on investing in maintaining and modernizing our existing system. So of the vast amount of transportation resources we have right now, they are focused on the existing system. There are, however, expansion projects in the plan as well, and you'll see that they're multimodal. I think the split off the top of my head between the transportation projects is about half highways, half transit. The new infrastructure bill has offered a whole range of opportunities to advance a number of transit projects that have been on the books in the near term. So the mix is, I think, a little bit different than I think, you get from the surface level commentary that we've received. However, as I noted earlier, one of our big commitments and areas that we want to continue to advance is that nexus between climate and transportation. So again, we looked at the tools that we have right now. We want to take a deeper dive on how we evaluate transportation projects into the future. So there is an RFP. I think it actually got posted yesterday as I was looking through my emails to help us better evaluate our transportation infrastructure projects for greenhouse gas and resiliency across the region. So that work we do anticipate coming out through the 2060 plan in totality. But the board this morning will receive sort of a more thorough update on the plan. But at this point, it really just is an item of information, and that if any questions about the public comment or the process overall that the committee members have this morning, I'm happy to take those.
Very good. Thank you, Erin. Are there any questions for Erin on the 2050 plan update? Okay, thank you. Thanks again, Erin. We appreciate that. Our next item is other business. Is there any other business to come before, excuse me, the committee this morning? Okay, thank you. Hearing none, we'll move on to public comment. At this time, staff will read any comments received prior to today's meeting and recognize those speakers that may be in the chat box. Stephanie?
Thank you. Just a reminder, if any attendees wish to address the committee, please indicate so in the chat box. Staff did not receive comments prior to today's meeting, and we have not received any notifications in the chat box. And so at this time, if there's any individuals joining us by phone that wish to make a comment, please indicate so by stating your name now. If not, there appears to be no individuals wishing to address the committee at this time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We'll close public comment. Our next meeting, our committee will meet on November 9th. So please put that on your calendar. We'll, as usual, provide copies of the agenda and materials prior to the meeting. If there is no other business to come before the committee this morning, we will stand adjourned. Thank you all for your participation, and Stephanie and Katie, thank you for your support in preparing the agenda and the materials this morning. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thank you.